Thank you so much, everyone, for joining me for another episode of Darker Than Blue here on WPFW 89.3 FM in the Washington, D.C. area. WPFW, we are changing the world one broadcast at a time. And again, you're listening to Darker Than Blue. I am Jacquie Luqman. Darker Than Blue, the show where we talk about socialism, struggle, and soul. And we certainly have a lot of that on deck for today's show, because whether you realized it or not, there is an enormous trial that is about to happen down in Tampa, Florida, and it could have implications that can affect organizers, particularly Black radical organizers throughout this country. But it shouldn't be a shock, because it's just a continuation of the history of struggle and the repression of those of us who are engaged in struggle that we and our ancestors have experienced for decades. But this time, the target is my guest. One of the targets is my guest. And today I am very pleased and proud to have on the show Chairman Omali Yeshitela, the chairman of the African People's Socialist Party and the Uhuru movement attached to the APSP. They are under attack right now by the Federal Bureau of Investigation, by the U.S. government, for some ridiculous charges. So I am going to stop editorializing, and I'm going to welcome and turn this conversation over to Chairman Yeshitela. Chairman, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate every opportunity we get to break out of this information encirclement that has been imposed on us by the U.S. government as it pursues this extraordinarily ridiculous charge being made against me and the Uhuru Three for being Russian agents, that somehow after 60 years or more of being involved in the struggle for African people, the struggle against colonialism and for socialism, I suddenly became a Russian agent sometime around 2014 or 2015. So thank you very much for having us.
You mean to tell me it took you that long, Chairman, to decide to be a puppet of Putin? It took you, how long have you been in this struggle, sir? It's been 60 years, and it took you this long to take direction from the Russians. I laugh, and we are laughing at this, but this is a frightening situation that a lot of people are learning about. They don't know. A lot of people don't know this is going on because, interestingly enough, Chairman, this has not been reported in the news. I mean, of course, there's so much other stuff going on that is captured the attention of the news cycle. One, obviously, being the coup in the Democratic Party and their choice of a truly abominable candidate replacement for a truly abominable president in Joe Biden. But we're not talking about that.
Did you say Obama no? I'm trying to understand what you said. Did you say Obama no?
Close enough, close enough. Why, as I bring that up, let me remind folks that the views expressed on Darker Than Blue might not be the views expressed by WPFW and the Pacifica Network. Just want to make sure I say that before we go further. Right. So, Chairman, this claim, these charges against you and other members of your organization are stemming from this idea that you all are not just Russian agents, but that you are directed by the Russian government, that you are paid by the Russian government, that you are under their influence. And I guess you're being accused of being like I don't know, an inactive cell of whatever they think the Russian government is in the United States. What are these charges? What are the charges based on? And why is this such a horrible situation?
Well, the charges are based on the fact that they have used certain facts to obscure truth, to hide the truth. They've used facts to construct a lie. It is a fact that I went to Moscow twice in 2015. It is a fact that we ran candidates in 2017 and 2019 for city council and mayor on the reparations platform. It is a fact that we traveled to several cities when what's the comment, Fanon came through.
Muriel Fanon, yeah.
Yeah, working for the United Nations, checking on the conditions of African people here. It is a fact that our online newspaper did an interview with Alexander Ionov, a Russian, to get comments on what was happening with the Russia-Ukraine thing. But they've taken these facts and then they've constructed horrendous lies. Because even as they talk about my going to Moscow in 2015, they leave out the fact that I have gone to Spain and participated with non-governmental organizations. They are connected to the Spanish government that paid us money. And I did that in 2017. And at that meeting, I actually criticized the United States government like I have been doing around the Ukrainian war, which is something that is supposed to be evidence also of this being puppets or servants of Russia. But I've criticized virtually every war the United States has been involved in, every imperialist war, having concluded a long time ago that it's impossible, it's nearly impossible, if it's possible at all, for the United States to participate in a just war. I mean, they've taken these facts and then they've constructed these horrible lies. They have done this while obscuring or not even dealing with the fact that historically African people have been responsible for raising every movement for democracy in this country. We have been the leaders of democratic struggle here forever. So this notion that somehow the Russians would intervene and tell us that we are oppressed and tell us that we should fight for reparation. We, the African People's Socialist Party, built the first international tribunal on reparations for African people in this country. And we did that in 1982. And this was where we put the United States government on trial for the crime of genocide against African people. We used international law as the basis for that trial. And we had an international panel of jurors. And we used the United Nations Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide with that. So they would liquidate all of that, and they would liquidate even the fact that some 3 or 4 years after the United Nations Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of Genocide in 1948, that Black people were at the United Nations with the We Charge Genocide document that you can even purchase in the form of a book right now, charge the United States government with genocide against Black people. In fact, our genocide convention and the things we have done around genocide is based on what Black people did years ago in 1951 at the United Nations. So all of these things efforts, the things that we've done, they cover that, they smother that, and they try to say that because somehow we went to Russia, that made us Russian agents. It's just ridiculous.
So what you did, all you did was visit Russia, and somehow this has turned into you are Russian agents. So were you?
And we had a relationship with the anti-globalization movement of Russia, which is a non-governmental organization. That's how it introduced itself to us. That's how we have what we've understood it to be. And so we had that kind of relationship, and we attended in Moscow conferences that have been organized by the anti-globalization movement. I have visited campuses there that at one time the Patrice Lumumba, the Lumumba University have been presented to our struggle, people to be trained in Russia at the height of the struggle against colonialism. I spoke there to refugees. I visited various sites in Russia, including the extraordinary metro subway, if you will, where I've never seen anything like it in terms of the kind of art. And I heard coming from the loudspeakers in that subway station, the voice of Paul Robeson singing the International in Russia. So I did that kind of thing. I was in there. I also attended a conference that was called for people who are struggling for self-determination from various places. There were people there from Ireland, Spain, Hawaii, Puerto Rico, you name it. A whole array of people attended that, including us. And we went there to represent African people at this conference to break out of this encirclement that's imposed on us by the Zuckerbergs, by all of these forces who control the media here and around the world.
Now, I want to go back to what you said about the organization that you had connections with. It's a non-governmental organization. Now, surely the U.S. government knows this, but what does it say about the U.S. government's posture toward these kinds of organizations in other countries where they would indict Africans in this country for having connections with a non-governmental organization in Russia, but the indictment accuses you of basically being agents of the Russian government, even though you didn't have any relationship with the Russian government. It's a non-governmental organization that you were involved in. What does that aspect of these charges say
Well,
to us?
they claiming that the anti-globalization movement of Russia was something that was funded by the Russian government. So that's how they tried to make that connection. But it doesn't say anything about, forces like AIPAC and all these other forces that put millions and millions of dollars into the political system in this country and who do not have to register as foreign agents or anything like that. So I don't know if this who funded it. If the Russian government funded the anti-globalization movement of Russia. They didn't tell us that. They sent us a message inviting us to participate in a couple of conferences and some things afterwards. So, but what it says is, the people, when I was in Russia, there were people who complained about the fact that the United States had put into their countries into their country non-governmental organization that was being disruptive and trying to function to undermine the government there. So I don't know in terms of what this says about the United States government. It says, among other things, that Africans are to be totally reliant on the United States for any response to what the United States government is doing to us as a people. It says that the United States, while it is posturing around the world at this moment as the headquarters of democracy in this great contest with autocracy, it says that the United States cannot allow to have African people and others speak out because it belies this notion of the great democracy where Black people are being shot down in the streets and sometimes killed even by white civilians on a regular basis. So this is a problem in the struggle that the United States government is now involved in, maintaining its hegemony over the whole world economy. And that's something that's being seriously challenged. It's being seriously challenged by people in Venezuela, but all over Cuba, throughout the Middle East, and also now recently revived Russia and China. This is something that's challenging this hegemony of the United States government, and it cannot tolerate free speech. It cannot tolerate these kinds of relationships that belie the narrative that they have created to justify their existence and the things they do to people around the world and in this country as well.
And as far as you know, because you did say that there were people from many other countries at these conferences, as far
Right.
as you know, has anybody else been charged in any other countries with
Well,
the same kind of charges that you all have been charged with?
it's interesting because two of the groups that attended these conferences were white groups. One that was, at least two of them, I should say. One that led some kind of secessionist movement for this group of white people to to take California. And
I
another,
remember those
uh,
folks.
yeah, and
Yeah.
another secessionist group of white people that was bent on taking Texas. So
Ah.
initially, they were characterized as unindicted co-conspirators along with me and my comrades. But what has transpired is it seems like they are not indicted. They are not indicted.
Oh.
So yeah, yeah,
Oh, oh, that is an interesting
yeah,
little wrinkle to this
yeah.
case here that was not public knowledge. I do remember the two individuals from the organizations that you mentioned, and I thought it was interesting when this indictment first came out, and they were the co-conspirators, the unindicted
Right,
co-conspirators.
right,
And I
right.
thought, well, that's interesting, but because if they were in the same place, why are they unindicted?
Yeah,
And now they're just not even a part of this at all. So that there is something else for those of
they is.
you who are listening
Yeah.
to consider about the legitimacy and the fairness of this case. All right. So we don't want to imperil the case. So there's not
Right.
a whole lot that I know that you can talk about. So I think we've unless there's something else you need for us to know about the case, the trial that is about to happen, the jury selection goes on. It commences on Tuesday, on September 3rd. And then the trial gets underway after that. Well, what do you need us listening in Washington, D.C., and around the country and around the world? What do you need us to know about this trial, Chairman, in order to support you and to spread the word about what's going on?
Well, first of all, I want to say that there's a real serious base of support for this struggle that we're involved in Washington, D.C., in that area. I cannot, you know, some of the people, I'm sure, and so it's a very serious base of support that's there. But what we have done is to initiate Freedom Summer. And Freedom Summer takes its name and spirit from the Mississippi Freedom Summer of 1964. That's the movement that uh, gave awareness of a lot of people who were not in the movement of Fannie Lou Hamer because she was a critical force in the Freedom Summer movement. This is something done by the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, primarily SNCC, and have been an organizer for SNCC. Well, was a SNCC member as well. And Freedom Summer was initiated because of the terror that was being waged against African people. And it seemed that Mississippi was the extreme example of that kind of terror. The right to vote, the right to even have different opinions, the right to be free from terror bombings and things like that. And so Freedom Summer was initiated by SNCC with an objective being in part to revitalize interest in the civil rights movement, because as you mentioned something about what you call it, the news cycle had gone past and many people were no longer interested, many white people were no longer interested in what was happening in the civil rights movement. So SNCC organized the Freedom Summer, and an objective also associated with it was to bring a lot of white people, students and things into Mississippi as well. On the first day of Freedom Summer, 3 people disappeared. One African, Cheney, 2 white people, Goodman and Schwerner. And sure enough, they had been murdered. And it's really, I guess, with some kind of irony, the free speech, Freedom Summer that we're doing here is to do some of the same stuff that SNCC did then, that the Freedom Summer was about then. Is to go door to door. We're organizing in the communities. We're talking to people, bringing them into political life, using this case as one of the bases of re-energizing the popular support for resistance and struggle here. We're doing political education. We're doing rallies. We're out on the streets every day. There are people who've come in from various places in Washington, D.C., from California, from St. Louis, and other places who are doing postering, who are going door to door, talking to people, dropping flyers and information, and building for September 3rd, and then also building for August 31st. That is to say, the massive mobilization that we're going to have a lot of people here from around the country.
Mhm.
Also, I think it's the irony that I inferred earlier is the fact that Schwerner and Goodman and Cheney, Schwerner and Goodman were murdered. And this was to be an example to white people who stood in solidarity with the Black liberation movement at that time. In this instance, you have Chairman Omali, you have Penny Hess and Jesse Neville, two white people who've also been indicted, which is rather extraordinary if you think in historical terms. And so I think the example is to be the same. This is, see, we're not talking about winning people to integration or anything like that. Our struggle is for absolute control of our lives, self-determination, anti-colonial movement. And so it's tolerable for people to be involved in a movement that endorses the validity of this relationship with the United States by begging to be let in. But it's another thing when we're saying that we are the only group of people in this country, other than the indigenous people, who did not come here looking for a better way of life, but lost one. And when you look at the Bill of Rights and the First Amendment, most of the people who it should be recognized that it was in 1791 before they were even adopted by the United States Congress. 1791, we were under the whip. We were having the most vicious kind of brutality imposed upon us, worked like dogs for free. And so it was only after the Civil War, 1865, that some nominal freedom was supposed to have come to us. But obviously that wasn't the case, because otherwise there wouldn't have had to be a 1964 Civil Rights Act, and wouldn't have to be a 1965 Voting Rights Act, et cetera. So we've been in this thing for a long time, but as long as things can go undisturbed, if the status quo can maintain itself without any involvement, interruption by people like ourselves, then all of this stuff is forgotten. And they are trying to make this trial happen in a fashion so that the history cannot be revealed. In fact, the prosecutor at one juncture had made a motion to the court that free speech could not be used as a defense as our defense. And so the court in this instance it refused that position. And so free speech is something that obviously can be used or can be used. That was their position, that we should not be able to use free speech as a defense, freedom of speech.
But I thought as quote unquote, I'm using air quotes now for folks who are listening on the radio. But I thought we were supposed to be Americans with
Yeah,
rights.
yeah,
And the freedom of speech was supposed to be, or is supposed to be, one of the rights that alleged citizens have. So
yeah,
when the prosecution, which represents the state, which represents the government, which represents the Constitution, says that these people who are on trial don't have a right to use free speech as a defense, geez, Chairman, doesn't that kind of sound like the government is saying you're not citizens?
well, yeah, it's the government acknowledging something that's been the here's the irony in that. African people in this country have always been on the forefront of the fight for democracy. We've always been.
Yeah.
We're the ones who brought about in this country universal suffrage. We're the ones that Black people did that. They talk about the Russians have to pay us to run for elections. Nobody paid a higher price to participate in elections than Black people in this country. Our churches were bombed, our children were murdered, children were brutalized, the kind of terror that we've gone through, and the numbers of African people who were organizers, et cetera, who were killed and went to prison, we don't even know their names. We don't know everybody who was involved in that. So this notion that somehow that free speech is available to everybody, obviously it could not have been the case. Otherwise, as I said, wouldn't have been necessary for a 1964 civil rights bill that Joe Biden was opposed to when he was a senator, a 1965 Voting Rights Act, and it wouldn't have been necessary for African people to have gone through. So we've been, if you would measure patriotism by defense of the Constitution, if you would measure patriotism by defense of the Bill of Rights, which people who constructed the Constitution said were fundamental to the kind of society they were trying to build, And Africans have been the most patriotic forces in this country because nobody fought harder for civil rights, for voting rights, for right to free speech. Look at Emmett Till. You're talking about right to free speech. I was the same age Till was when he was murdered. You see, so this is our record as a people. And you look at so some people say, well, I don't know, the FBI said this, you say this. So you look at the history of us and you look at the history of the FBI, because you don't know, you weren't here when any of this stuff happened. But look at the history of the FBI, look at our history. And then that would help to inform you because truth is concrete. And the fact is, we have always fought for freedom. You didn't like it, but we were there. And they've always fought to keep us from being free. Marcus Garvey, Du Bois, Paul Robeson, the whole list of folk that can be mentioned. The FBI, particularly, and other agencies have attacked and sometimes killed these people. So I mean, Martin Luther King. I mean, look at Malcolm X, and right now everybody wants to love Martin Luther King, but look at what they did to King. Look at what they did to him, and tried to make him commit suicide. And and anybody who's ever watched that speech that he made the night before he was murdered can see clearly that King knew that he was on the hit list. He knew it. He said it. If the whole mountaintop, I may not get there with you, the whole thing, and look at him. Look at the expressions in his face. So, this is what we've had to live with in the process of trying to live as a people, and we're determined to live. And so they use flashbang grenades. They took in terabytes the equivalent of 2.5 million books. You understand? When they
from
took
your
out
properties
from
the initial raid,
the stuff, the raids that they took, the raids that went into the stuff they got in terms of our computers, our cell phones, our laptops, they took the equivalent of 2.5 million books. They were in our properties for 6 and 7 hours, and then they hauled stuff away. They were in the archives of our organization here in St. Petersburg, Florida. They took our radio station temporarily off the air. They took something, I've forgotten how you count this stuff in terabytes. I don't even know what a terabyte is, but I'm told it was the equivalent of 2.5 million books. And so they will try to make it tell whatever story they wanted to tell. But the fact is, they may find a word or two that they can twist to say, well, that's what he meant, or that's what, but there's nothing truthful about what they're doing. They're using facts, as I said, to hide the truth.
And Chairman, I'm wondering, and I'm sure people who are listening are wondering, why does the federal government feel that your organization is such a threat? I suspect that it's that pesky little word that begins with an S that is in your organization's title, and that's socialist. Why has the government had such an incredibly long history of antagonism, violence, brutality, and injustice against people who believe in socialism? And is that the case for why they are coming after you?
I think that's part of the case, but I think one reason they would attack us, and I think most African militants, some of whom did not call themselves socialists or anything like that, is because of the colonial contradiction. Karl Marx, some would call, many see as the whole father of the quote unquote socialist movement. Yeah. But he made the point in explaining the origin of capitalism. He said that there was this thing that he called primitive accumulation of capital, the beginning of the entire process. He said it was turning Africa into a warren for the commercial hunting of black skins. He said it was turned indigenous people in this land where I am now into the mines, bringing up gold and silver for the colonizers. He said it was the assault that was made on the East India, that in India and in Southern Asia, etc. He said this is where it came from, and for what he is describing for us is a colonial mode of production. That that in the Portugal started this thing 600 years ago when it attacked us and began the distribution of African people all around the world and constructed what initiated the process where other people who became Europeans were capturing and dispersing African people all around the world, and particularly in this hemisphere. The first time in history, you saw the emergence of a world economy. There was no world economy before that. World economy linked the entire world into a single economy, and that was a colonial mode of production. So I think that when we talk about socialism, it recognizes that in order to get to socialism, we have to kick out this foundation, which is colonialism. And this is what most of the white left has had a problem understanding and uniting with, that if you're really interested in getting to socialism, Ho Chi Minh asked the question, what kind of revolution are you talking about if you're not fighting against colonialism? He said he was one of the founding members of the French Communist Party, and he had that problem with the French and communists as well. So we say that the whole edifice rests upon the foundation of our enslavement, and that if you want to get to socialism, you want to get to this new system, you have to destroy capitalism, which has its foundation on colonialism, our oppression, the extraction of value from Black people. Can your brain even conceive of a capitalism that did not require taking this land that you and I own now, that did not require what they've done to Africa and African people, the enslavement and all this stuff? You can't even imagine a capitalism. It would have been impossible. That's what, and I think because we are socialists and we are uniting African people around the world in single organization, one organization, and because we are fighting against colonialism as the foundation for the capitalist system, I think, yes, socialism is the fundamental aspect of it, especially, as the way we defined it and fight for it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And I like what you said about Karl Marx, because I do seem to recall that Marx himself said that he simply observed socialism and documented it. It was running free in the wild. People were collectivist and socialist before Marx wrote the first word about it, and he admitted, all I did was observe it and document it. And socialism will look different in different countries because of their different material conditions and their different histories. He literally said that. So I don't know why people keep thinking that Karl Marx is the father of socialism when he basically said, I am not the father of socialism. I just took the notes.
He took notes. I took good notes.
He took great notes. So I really do appreciate, Chairman, that you are able to laugh still in this time, because this is a serious case. This is not one of those misdemeanor kind of, it's not a bench trial, it's not a this is a very serious, these are federal charges. This is prison time, federal prison time that they are threatening you and your comrades with. What are they attempting to stop with this? Because I feel like that is the foundation of their purpose for going after you all. What is it do you think the government is trying to stop or destroy or intimidate? Who are they trying to intimidate by going after the APSP and the Uhuru movement? And I would like for you to explain the difference between the APSP and the Uhuru movement, because I think in that is also a little bit of revelation about the nature of these charges and this witch hunt against you.
Well, I want to say that in terms of what they are attempting to do here, and this is one of the things that makes this charge so dangerous. This is the first time in history that these charges have ever been made based on purely speech, which is not to say that they've been good charges in the past, but usually it's to do with espionage, bribery, all this other kind of stuff. They can't say we were involved in espionage, bribery, what do you call it, sex trafficking or drug pushing or anything like that. So it's the first time in history that this has happened. And one of the things, and so that's a dangerous thing. It's never happened just purely on speech before. Secondly, related to that is that the government has a position that if it's allowed to prevail, says that anybody who has a position that is the same as a country, another government, or someplace else can be charged as for being agents. For example, they charge us with having the same position on Ukraine as the Russians. But there are a lot of people. In fact, we got witnesses that we're going to bring who are professors, esteemed professors here, who would say that a lot of people are at the same position, in terms of that. So, and that's part of what the charges is. And so, if they can get away with this, then anybody who has a position about anything that is the same as another country that the United States may have contention with or disagreement with can be charged. And that's anybody. And when I say it, like this so emphatically, it's because we didn't do what they said we did. It's absolutely, they fabricated this. So, but if they can come up and say that our position was better than the position of Russia, if you want to know the truth around this whole Ukraine and et cetera, because for us it goes back more than 100 years. When after the Russian Revolution, Russia came under attack by all the colonial powers, including the United States and Japan, who invaded Russia, and it has been relentless since that time, with some moderations and reiterations at different times. But that's our position, that it started a long time ago, and that this is a very serious contest. So we think that's one of the things that they want to make it illegal. And so they didn't charge me with being in Nicaragua, and they didn't, for working for the Nicaraguans. They haven't charged me with working for the Spanish, even though the Spanish government was a partner with the NGO that I spoke for in 2007. They didn't tell, I worked with the Irish Republican Socialist Party. This was even while the so-called troubles were going on, before the nominal freedom of Ireland, and it is nominal freedom of Ireland, ever occurred. I was there. So I mean, in Suriname, I'm in so many different places around the world, but it's become convenient now because they've used the Russia boogeyman and the black, and you put those things together. And so they are making an assumption that if you say black and Russia, that you can liquidate the need for having evidence that there's enough prejudice that they've created in this country against black and Russians, and the two of them together, that they can get a conviction without evidence. But I think the precedent that they want to start is to be able to charge anybody who disagrees. And if that disagreement you have is an agreement is the same as some other government or some other country may have. I think that's extremely dangerous.
Yeah, it is extremely dangerous because, certainly I've been called a Russian agent many times for several articles I have written criticizing the U.S. proxy war using Ukraine against Russia. And I've been called that by some folks on the left.
I know.
So we have lived these struggles. Interestingly enough, I haven't been sued by the government yet. So this is why this case is so important, because many of us involved in the liberation struggle in whatever way we are, we hold very much, particularly those of us who are anti-imperialists. You see, this is a particular position, not just among people who call themselves anti-war, which is very nebulous. It's not specific enough, and there are times when you have to fight. So it is not enough to be anti-war. You have to be anti-imperialist, a particular kind of militarism that pushes settler colonialism and capitalist imperialist ideology, and we're against that. So of course, we recognize the proxy war as a proxy war. So if this lawsuit is allowed to succeed, if it succeeds, and you all are indicted, then
we're indicted
truly,
already.
or I'm
We're
sorry, and
yeah,
you
we're
all
convicted.
are
Yeah.
right, thank you. I
Yeah.
used the wrong word, and
Mhm.
you all are convicted, then truly the rest of us are next. And
Yes.
that is exactly what the government is trying to do. They're literally trying to terrify us into silencing our anti-imperialism. Into
Yes.
they're like, fine, you can
Yes.
do all of the other stuff you do,
Yes.
but this criticism of foreign policy and this international solidarity and
Yes.
this talking to people around the world that you all are doing, oh no, we have to stop that. Because
Yes.
that has never been something that
Exactly.
this government has ever wanted oppressed and marginalized people in their settler colony to figure out and pursue international solidarity with global anti-imperialist forces. And here you all are doing that very thing. So please explain, and I think this is important for us to know the difference between the connections, but the difference between the APSP and the Uhuru movement. Related but not the same, and why does that matter here?
Yeah, and the African People's Socialist Party was born in 1972, but our history it goes back to SNCC in the 1960s, and it goes back to this incredible movement that happened in East Africa and Kenya, led by the Kenyan Land and Freedom Army called Mau Mau, and the slogan of Mau Mau was Uhuru. And it was a terrifying slogan to all of the colonizers and all of the sellouts too.
Mm,
And this was a slogan that it really gripped the imagination of Black people all around the world. Even Lumumba was using Uhuru, and so the Kenyan Land and Freedom Army, Mau Mau, took this battle on, and for many years, people thought Jomo Kenyatta incorrectly was the leader of Mau Mau. Jomo Kenyatta was also called Burning Spear, which is the name of our newspaper
mhm,
because of that. And the organization that I created initially was called the Hunter of Militant Organizations. This is after SNCC, is because I needed something that had the acronym JOMO based on this thing. So the
mhm,
Africa thing was very much alive with us and the connection and the resistance. And so people used to refer to us, even the state, as the Uhurus. The
mm,
Uhurus, that was something they characterized us as. And in 1972, having the repression and what have you, SNCC and all these other organizations had concluded that it's not enough just to have movement based on protests, that we have to be talking about the means by which we can capture and wield political power. We have to have power. And so to do that, we determined that it would be best to have a political party, and we have the African People's Socialist Party. And
mhm,
so the African People's Socialist Party, we were the Uhurus initially. But then we developed, like a whole strategic approach because we came into existence with the stated objective to complete that revolution that was started in the 60s. That was militarily defeated. Militarily defeated. When I say military, I'm talking about with assassinations and all these other
mhm.
things that happened to us. So
Yes.
we're going to complete that revolution. And we're not going to do the civil rights thing anymore as such. The civil rights movement would be led by the revolutionary movement. That is to say, our starting point is knowing that we have to have power. We came to this somehow through spontaneous struggles in the 1960s, but now we know we have to have political power. So we created first in Oakland, California in the 80s, and then by 1991 we created the iteration that's called the International People's Democratic Uhuru Movement, NPDUM. And this was an organization that was designed to defeat the counterinsurgency that had wiped us out, before, and to initiate the struggle for democracy on every front we could. That was part of it. Then we also created in 1960, let's say 62 or 66, the African People Solidarity Committee. And this became a part of the Uhuru movement.
Mhm.
And after that, we created, various other kinds of organization, African National Women's Organization. We had an African National Prison Organization, African National Reparations Organization. All of this was called, considered Uhuru movement, and more forces who adopted our philosophy and our sometimes organizational relationship, but not always, became part of the Uhuru movement.
Mhm.
And yeah, that's what we're looking at. And we exist everywhere. And I mean, not just as protesters, but we have organization in the townships in South Africa. I mean, these are the African People's Socialist Party. We have organizations in Namibia. We have organizations in Ghana. We have organizations in Sierra Leone, just various places throughout Africa and in England and in France. And we have footprints in Belgium and Sweden and Holland. We have footprints those places. We have had organizers and organizations there, but they don't exist in the same fashion anymore. But we have these really important relationships. And so I think this is what contributes to the problem too, because if you notice, the U.S. military now, its entire face is African. Lord Austin, the so-called Department of Defense, black man. The first African the first in the 246-year history, an African general was given a 4-star for the first time in history. And he was put over AFRICOM, controlling black people in the continent and protecting Africa for U.S. Against China, against Russia, and against Africans ourselves. And then you have the Air Force General black man who I think his name is Charles Brown. That might be Charles Brown, who has been put in charge of the Joint Chief of Staff. So over all the military, the whole military apparatus in this country has a black face. And clearly Africa is central to that. That's part of what it is that they're working with. So this is the Uhuru movement. And our objective is to have power, that it doesn't make sense to just be on this treadmill or just running, just to be busy, that the objective, we have to say to what end, to what end? And we say that we have to have power of our own lives. Yeah, but we're not, like this thing that's put forth by these charges, something about Russia was, trying to deal with secessionists, and we've been clear, we're not a secessionist movement. And that's not to say that I'm not fighting Africans who talk about succeeding in some way. The reason we are not secessionists is because all this land is indigenous land. And the people are in these concentration camps called Indian reservations today. And nobody even speaks to it. So we don't feel like we should contribute to add more weight to the attack that's being made on the Lakota and the Seminole and the Hopi and just the basic indigenous people here. But we believe that Africa has to be free. We believe that the national homeland of Black people is Africa, that Africa is the birthright for every living human Black person on the planet Earth. We believe that the African nation extends around the world. It's ubiquitous. It is part of Jamaica. It is part of Haiti. It's all these other places. That's a part of that. And it's part of St. Louis, if you will, East St. Louis, because what they did when they captured and dispersed the Africans, but they also dispersed Africa to these various places.
Right.
And many people don't understand that because they say, well, you're no African because, you don't know nothing about African culture. And the reason they say that is because they don't recognize that African culture is ubiquitous. It is everywhere. It is Ray Charles. It is James Brown. It is Fela. Yeah, it is everywhere, you see. And so that's why they say that, yeah. And it comes in different languages too.
Yeah, it really does. And it's interesting when you go to other countries, when you go to places like Nicaragua and you go to Cuba and you go to Venezuela for the first time, like I did a few years ago, and the first people you see when you get off the plane are people who look like you. And then you realize that everything you've been told about these countries in this country are just absolute lies. And then you see our culture. our
True.
Africanness.
Yes, yes,
You
yes,
see
yes.
it, you smell it, you
Yeah,
feel it,
yeah,
you
yeah,
taste it. It's
yeah.
ever, and then this is how you fall in love with
Mm-hmm.
our people around the world, and you
Mm-hmm.
recognize, oh, we are connected.
Yes, yes.
So let me ask you about COINTELPRO,
Mm-hmm.
because obviously, the FBI would love for us to believe that COINTELPRO is over. They're not doing that anymore. Um, we know that's not true, but this is an interesting question I think that people have been asking. Is the repression and the surveillance, the counterinsurgency, you talked about the counter-revolutionary actions by the government, is this iteration of repression worse, more intense, more all encompassing than the first phase of COINTELPRO? And I feel weird about even calling it the first phase, because there was the whole anti-communist labor repression that
Yeah,
happened before.
yeah,
The official, I guess, Red Scare of the McCarthy era that happened long before. This was during World War One, where the government was raiding labor union offices and such, looking for anti-American activity and communist leaflets. So there's always been an aspect in this government of surveillance and counterinsurgency. But has it gotten worse, do you think, in your estimation, in these recent times?
Well, first of all, I really want to appreciate you raising that question, because many people who are involved in politics, and especially people who characterize themselves as leftists and progressives, etc., do not understand this important question of the state. And the state is this entity that controls all these organs of repression: the police, the CIA, the army, the military, the court system, the jails and prisons. They are representative of the state. And the state is this bureaucracy that is there to protect the status quo. Because what is there, for example, that would prevent somebody being oppressed or exploited from killing their oppressors, from breaking out of their exploitation, etc.? There's this special entity that has arisen at the time in human history where society was split between haves and have-nots, and those who have it as a consequence of taking it from those who don't have it. There has to be some apparatus to control and stabilize this situation, to keep it like it is. And that's the state. And it looks different depending on the situation, but we can't confuse the state with the nature of the society itself.
Mm.
For example, what many people are seeing now is greater repression. It's happening because you see this every time there is a crisis, economic, political crisis. You see the greater repression that happens, and people, in our estimation, erroneously characterizing this as a prototypical of the rise of fascism. But fascism is just a form of the state, because if you look at some of the highest those who have the highest accolades in terms of fighting against fascism, the French. The French fighting against the Nazis and what have, but at the same time, they were fighting against the Nazis. They were killing people in Vietnam. They had our people in Algeria. This colonialism is the fundamental question. And this is when you see the colonial edifice begins to shake in some way or another, resistance there, the growing inability to get the resources, and it creates contests between sectors of the colonial powers themselves. They begin to scrap with each other and things like that. And then repression becomes necessary. Who's saying what to whom? Are you having this relationship over here, etc.? So repression becomes necessary in order to stabilize this. And this repression, when the colonial contradiction begins to intrude into the society of the colonizers, that's the thing that they've characterized as fascism. For example, I hear a lot of discussion about fascism now, but they weren't saying it was fascism when George Floyd was killed, when all these Black people everywhere was being killed, when that you got all these black people in prison. They have not saying that's fascism.
Mm.
It's colonialism is what it is. And we have to force the white left to deal with the colonial question. Because when you're dealing with just fascism, you're choosing one side of the colonizers versus another side. And they use us, they play on us like that. For example, Trump is the proto-fascist, that's out there, et cetera. So everybody, you got to work against Trump. You got to work against Trump. You got to support the FBI and all the stuff they're doing against Trump. You got to do all this kind of stuff against Trump, but the fact is that you can have liberal fascists. You can have reactionary fascists. Fascism remains the same. I mean, colonizers, I should say. The colonialism remains the same. It doesn't matter if it's a fascist or a liberal that's colonizing people to death. We have no rights. The colonized people have no rights at all. I mean, Judge Taney, who made that statement in 1857 to Dred Scott, said that black man has no rights that a white man has to respect. That's always been the case. It's the case now. But they need popular support for this. And that's why our work is so important. That's why getting people on the 31st is so important. That's why filling up that courtroom is so important. That's why the fact that we have white people who are working in 130 some odd cities as a part of the Uhuru movement right now, taking out the message of reparations, taking out the message of genocide that's being committed against African people, taking out the message against colonialism. This is going on every day right now. And so because they need the support of the people for this stuff to work. And in the 1960s, we did a lot of good work, but we were unable to do some of the things that we are doing now. 1966, as you know, SNCC told the white members of SNCC to go into the black community where the heart of the contradiction was, go and organize white people to support this struggle that we're involved in. And the white people left, they left crying and feeling that they were double-crossed and stuff like that. But they didn't do that. They went and did their own thing. But now we've created a movement where we don't say go to your own community and on your own. They are part of the Uhuru movement. They're under the leadership of the Black Revolution. So that's Penny Hess, that's Jesse Neville, two of the Uhuru Three, and that's a whole bunch of other folk, and they're scattered everywhere, so that's really important. And I just want to appreciate you, Comrade Sister Jacquie, for opening up this door to us so that we can explain some of these ideas. And I just think it's important because again, they would, if they could, take advantage of that. They have validated the Black people, the good Black people, and the good Black organizations. It's not just Kamala, and it's not just Obama, but it is Black Lives Matter. It is all kinds of stuff that don't challenge. Like, what does the slogan Black Lives Matter mean? Really, what does it mean? I mean, it's and it doesn't put forth a position that challenges the relationship. I mean, you saw Joe Biden and the whole House, Democratic House, got down on one knee and put kente cloth over there. They can say Black Lives Matter, but I guarantee they won't say Black Power matters. They won't say anti-colonialism matters. They won't say that kind of stuff, and we do. And so they have chosen the respectable and good Black people, and I think they would hope that because most of the white people are familiar with, because of what the media have done with the NAACP, that might be all right with a lot of people, and possibly Martin Luther King's group, though they probably don't know what the name of it is. Could be all right, but to hear groups that's talking about anti-colonialism and self-determination, that's what they're hoping that they can work with, because we will appear to be these extreme forces out on the fringes someplace. That's a threat to all of them. And the fact is that we're the best thing they got if they want to keep this hammer from dropping on them, this repressive hammer, because it's extending beyond us, as you've already suggested. We said when this happened that this is the canary in the coal mine. And right, you saw what happened. You saw this stuff happening with the group fighting against Cop City. You saw this happen. I mean, just all across the board, this kind of thing began to happen. And now we have this magnificent movement coming together, and you'll see it on the 31st. More than maybe 200 different organizations crossing all the political and ideological spectrum. We're not trying to win everybody to be African nationalists or anti. We win them to the position, and this is what we have to force the state to deal with, the U.S. government, of free speech. First Amendment. This is, you wrote the First Amendment, not us. You wrote the Bill of Rights, not us. And the question is, can we hold your feet to that? That's what we've been doing since we've been in this country, trying to get them to live up to their own standard. I heard a speech that was played on our radio station today from Martin Luther King, who was talking about how America, has given us a bad check when it comes to living up to the ideals that it promised, So, yeah.
So how, finally, Chairman, how can people support you, the Uhuru 3, as this trial is scheduled to start with jury selection on Tuesday, September 3rd? There is the rally on the 31st. Give people information for if they want to go to Tampa to participate in the rally, or to Florida to participate in the rally if they are able to come and support during the trial. How can they? Where do they go?
Thank you. Please go to handsoffUhuru, UHURU.org. As I said, we've initiated Freedom Summer here. Come all the time. Come anytime. If you can get here on the 31st, get here on the 31st. If you can only get on the 3rd, get here on the 3rd. Come tomorrow. Come throughout. We're going to be doing this during the duration of the trial that they said is lasting up to 4 weeks. That's what they've suspected. That's what they've said. And then what we'll be doing every day, we'll be having Sunday rallies. We'll be working in the communities, getting the people out to the rallies, getting the people to come to the court, educating the masses. This is going to be an extraordinary laboratory that everybody can come in and participate with, like I said, much like the 1964 Summer Project in Mississippi. So go to handsoffUhuru.org. You can get all of the information and come to St. Petersburg, which is right across the bridge from Tampa, Florida, where the trial is going to be happening. Come now, bring your cousin with you, and your cat. But come to St. Petersburg. We look forward to seeing everybody. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chairman. I appreciate you taking the time out before this trial to come and speak to us. You have been listening to Chairman Omali Yeshitela of the African People's Socialist Party, the Uhuru movement. The federal trial against the organization and the 3 members of the organization begins on Tuesday. You have heard both the intense sincerity of his convictions and his principles, and that revolutionary joy that you can only get when you are in a serious struggle and you're serious about the work that you do, that you have joy in the progress that you will make, even in the face of serious state repression. That's the beauty of being a revolutionary. And that's why I love to do what I do so much, because people like Chairman give me hope to keep going. And I certainly hope that you have been given hope to keep going, or to do something if you haven't been doing anything. So thank you so much. This has been Darker Than Blue. Oh, really quickly before we leave, yesterday in the special programming for Black August, I incorrectly identified Baba Sundiata Akoli as still a political prisoner. He is not. He has been liberated. He was liberated in 2022. He is, I believe, now living in Texas, in Decatur, Texas, 87 years old, I believe. So I just wanted to make that correction. This has been Darker Than Blue. I am Jacquie Luqman. Thank you so much for tuning in. I will be broadcasting from Florida next week. And until then, and until next Friday, peace, everyone. If you are willing to fight for it, and if you have been paying attention, you realize you must.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Uhuru.
All right.